Hello, everyone. My name is Russell Clay. I am the host here of the Week 1 Slate Breakdown. I'm kind enough to be joined by our buddy Eric Mack here, who was also kind enough to write a full slate breakdown. So if you haven't checked that out on the site, that's live as of now. So certainly something to look at and help you with your DFS lineup construction. So how's it going, Eric?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, the funny thing is about the Week 1 slate breakdown, you can look at what I wrote going into the Panthers-Broncos game, and you can compare it to how well I did. Now, I wish I was more bullish on C.J. Anderson. He had an outstanding debut, and, with Gary Kubiak dealing with the first-time starting quarterback, you have to assume he's going to use him like an Arian Foster, high-volume running back, and I wish I was more bullish on C.J. Anderson.
I'll tell you what, I've been a CJ Anderson, I won't say hater, but certainly not high enough on him throughout his career so far. And I mean, you just look at what Gary Kubiak has done. It's totally his system this year, obviously with Peyton Manning gone. And yeah, I think initially, I don't think this is a fluke. It seems like they're going to be pretty run heavy all year. And I mean, that Panthers defense is no joke. So last night's a pretty solid indicator of future success there, I think.
High volume, and the most telling thing is his backups. Devontae Booker fumbled on his first NFL carry, but his backups didn't even cut into him that much, which last year he was kind of a modest back, and this year it looks like a fantasy stud. And a first-rounder that maybe those season-long fantasy leagues probably should have jumped on.
Absolutely. Yeah, Devontae Booker, that was a pretty brutal break for him. I mean, obviously, looked like he was going to get some snaps early on, and then he was just to the bench. So that's a bummer. But yeah, okay. So we're going to break into FanDuel and DraftKings here. The slates are a little different. No Monday night games on DraftKings this week. So that's the Rams 49ers and the Redskins and Pittsburgh. Yeah. So two of the more exciting teams there. And then, I mean, Todd Gurley. So that's kind of a bummer, but overall, we're still going to run through them at least for FanDuel purposes. Yeah. Getting into the first game here. So the Bills versus Ravens. What is there something specific you see in this matchup to attack, or is this one you're kind of avoiding?
Well, it's neither team is real explosive on the ground. Now they are high volume running attacks, but they're also facing pretty good defensive fronts. So I'm not really excited about this game. A defensive game in Week 1, one of the lower totals on the board. I'm not all over it. I guess if there's a matchup you get excited about, it would be Sam and Watkins. The Ravens defense a year ago surrendered the second most receiving touchdowns and the fifth most points to fantasy wideouts. So I'm not in love with the running game, but maybe Watkins off some play action and maybe a threat in the red zone maybe picks up a 681 type performance for you.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially in terms of him and Tyrod Taylor, I think that's a great sort of contrarian move. And Sammy Watkins not really even that contrarian. I love this matchup for him. I think that's a good call. I'm kind of somewhat intrigued by LaShawn McCoy this week. I don't think he's a top guy that people are talking about, and I'm not sure how the Ravens defense is going to really respond after the debacle that was their 2015 season. So I think he's kind of interesting in a tournament type of way. But overall, yeah, I think on the Bills side of things, it's really Watkins as the guy. I don't think they have enough volume to really look at like Robert Woods or, Charles Clay or any of the secondary pieces.
Right.
In terms of the Ravens, though, I mean, I don't know what to do with either the running backs, receivers, tight ends. It's just a big, bowl of jambalaya soup in there. Yeah.
It's a cluster mess. I like to call it a cluster mess.
Yeah. I mean, Steve Smith, he's 37, coming off a major injury. Kamar Aiken, sixth-year undrafted free agent who had a good year last year. Is there anything in this offense, or are you just kind of fading?
Not in this matchup. I think the Bills are going to be a better defense than you might expect. I think the Ryans working together could be kind of a smooth defense. I think it could be a defense you consider in future matchups when they're facing more of an error-prone quarterback. I don't love Joe Flacco, but I don't think he makes a lot of mistakes to help the Bills defense. But in general, the Ravens offense have a lot of work to do, has a lot of work to do, and this is not a week to be considering their fantasy options.
Certainly agree there. And obviously getting Joe Flacco back's a good thing instead of Ryan Mallett, but a long way to go for them for sure. Next one up here, a much more interesting game that I'm pretty excited about, Buccaneers and Falcons. Obviously Julio, back there, Devontae Freeman there. So who are you looking at for the Falcons side?
Well, you got to consider Julio Jones just because his matchup against the Bucs. The Bucs did horrible against Jones a year ago. I know Jones is the top of the price list, but you could get to 8 catches, 120 yards, and maybe a touchdown or 2 out of him. So the physical receiver Jones in a familiar matchup. I think if you're going with a Bucs player, you got to like the running back Doug Martin on volume, and maybe a sleeper at tight end. I think with Austin Seferian-Jenkins maybe not putting Cameron Brate in the background at tight end, I think maybe Brate gets into the end zone. I don't love the Bucs receivers against the Falcons, though. Dan Quinn was the Legion of Boom architect, and he made a bad Falcons secondary pretty good last year against wide receivers and quarterbacks. So it's not a good matchup for the receivers for the Bucs, but maybe an opportunity for Doug Martin.
Yeah, definitely agree. Falcons have Desmond Trufant there, and I think that's really an issue. Could be an issue for Mike Evans. As far as the Falcons, I think you mentioned it. We got that questionable tag with Julio Jones right now, but if he's playing, I think we just fire him in there without much concern. It seemed like he was practicing well.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of him, doing his Julio Jones jumping 50 inches in the air. So I think we're good to go with him.
Yeah, get used to it with Julio Jones. It'll be a weekly thing. He has some chronic foot and ankle issues, so it'll be a weekly thing. But when you're week one, having all the rest leading up to week one, I think this is a pretty safe time to consider Julio Jones a high-volume receiver.
Absolutely. And one more guy, you mentioned Doug Martin. I do like him. I think, on a site like DraftKings where it's PPR, I think Charles Sims might be an interesting guy. I'm not sure how the Falcons are going to be able to guard him, sneaking out on those screens and those dump offs. So I think that might be an interesting PPR guy. But overall, I think this game, in terms of Julio, and Devontae Freeman might be a little underrated this week. So yeah, I think overall that's a pretty interesting game.
Not to be a contrarian to you, but I think this is going to be a game that lines up more defense than you might imagine. Dan Quinn is more of a defensive guy. I think it's going to be a little bit of a slower pace than the total was 47.5, which in a pretty tight week one, that's a pretty high total. I think this is a game that'll go under, although with that said, I still do like Doug Martin against the Falcons front. He ran 95 yards on a touchdown in their last meeting, and of course the Julio Jones numbers I spat off before.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I like it. We're already disagreeing. So by the end, my face will probably be red and angry and disgruntled. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, okay, that's cool. So I'll be interested for your take on this next game here, the Packers and the Jaguars, because I feel pretty good about at least 2 of these guys in this game.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys you can love in this game. And while the Packers have a pretty good secondary and the Jags have a defense you can consider improving, when you put 2 quarterbacks against each other, the Packers on the road, Bortles coming off great numbers a year ago, great numbers in terms of passing totals, but he was a high sack, high turnover guy. I think this could be a wide open game, and I love the receivers on both sides. I think both quarterbacks can go 303. It's going to be a wide open game. If you're looking for some hidden value, although I would debate the actual amount that he's hid because Jared Cook made some splashes in the preseason. But his price is fairly low for a tight end, working with perhaps his best quarterback he's ever had in Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers maybe have never had a talented tight end like Jared Cook. So that could be a nice little play behind all the regulars you would consider.
See, you threw me out on the last game, but you reeled me right back in with a Jared Cook take because yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Jermichael Finley back in the day, and obviously that didn't work out too well. But I think Jared Cook could be the guy down the seam this year. That maybe he's not like a main contributor, but he's going to have some big games, I think, with his, athleticism and sort of what he can do, and Rodgers, precision. So I like him as a punt play this week. Super cheap, as you mentioned. I think some people are going to be on him, but the ownership's not going to be too high where you're worried about something like that. So I like him in all formats. I think he's a great play in this game. And Aaron Rodgers himself, he's probably my top cash game quarterback of the week. I mean, I know Dak Prescott is the guy this week because of his price, but I think Rodgers is right there. I know they're on the road, but I just think this Jags defense is maybe, at least 6 weeks away. They got a lot of young pieces that I think might need a few weeks to gel here. So Jordy's back, might not be playing full snaps, but I mean, I love what he does for Cobb, just being out there. So, I mean, I love Rodgers. I think this is a good time for him to, sneak into your lineups.
And whenever you get to two potent quarterbacks facing off, it pushes the pace of the game. This could be a game where both teams wind up in the 30s.
Absolutely, totally agree. Next game here, maybe not the same quality of quarterbacks that we looked at in the previous one. The always entertaining Jay Cutler versus the not usually ever on my mind Brock Osweiler.
Bears versus champion Brock Osweiler.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes, of course. Excuse me. Bears versus Texans, 44 total. Texans favored by 4. What are you seeing here, I guess?
I think the defense of the Texans is the play. Getting after Cutler, who tends to drop back and wait. And when he makes an indecisive move, it's usually a bad one. It turns into picks and turnovers. I think the Bears are going to be a work in progress offensively. Under John Fox, they might be a little bit better than you'll imagine defensively. So that makes me a bit more wary of DeAndre Hopkins at his price. Working in his first full game with Brock Osweiler, I think there's some concern there. Usually you don't worry about Hopkins, who he's working with. But I think John Fox can limit Hopkins' numbers. It's probably not a great week for Hopkins. And I think if you're playing anything here, you're going with the defense, getting after Cutler.
I definitely agree with that. The Texans obviously getting J.J. Watt back after what seemed like a kind of worrisome injury in the offseason, but he's back. He's J.J. Watt, so he's going to be out there, crushing the Bears offensive line. So that's good to see. Hopkins, I think that's an interesting point to make because I do like Hopkins this week, but you should certainly be a little worried about Brock Osweiler at least. And, what he's going to do. They obviously brought in Lamar Miller as well, who I kind of like this week as well. So I think he's priced up to where he should be, but I do think he's kind of intriguing against this Bears defense. As you mentioned, John Fox is there. So much like with Hugh Jackson and the Browns, like the talent just isn't there, but I love the maybe organization and the coaching ability there.
Well, one thing John Fox did, he took a very suspect Bears secondary, and they allowed the second fewest receptions to fantasy wideouts last year. They also allowed the fourth fewest receiving yards to wideouts. So that's another reason to be wary of Hopkins against the Bears.
Certainly. And secondary pieces, I hear a lot about Will Fuller, which I think is a promising young piece. But again, I think in this matchup that might be a little too far out on the edge for me. Next one here, two teams that are solid but might not make for a very fast paced or fantasy strong game. The Bengals and the Jets. Only a 41.5 over under. So you're not loving that. You do love some of the receivers, generally speaking.
Yeah.
But the matchup itself might not be, conducive to a ton of fantasy points.
Yeah, I think both defenses will mitigate each offense, and there are good players on both offenses, but they're good players that tend to feast on bad defenses, and the Bengals and the Jets don't appear to have bad defenses. Traditional defensive teams. The Bengals, you might be surprised, they were the third toughest team on opposing quarterbacks, and that's up at the Broncos and Seahawks level. So. The Bengals are tough on quarterbacks, so Fitzpatrick, who is usually a bargain play because of Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker on the outside, not a good time to use them this week.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of interested to see how, Matt Forte fits in with this new offense, but I don't think this is the week to, gamble on it going well. I think you maybe just wait for a better matchup. I'm not going to tell you not to play Brandon Marshall or AJ Green. But it's certainly less than, an optimal matchup. I know a lot of talk about Revis maybe not being what he once was, and I'd probably agree with that, but even if they give him a little extra help on AJ Green, might be a week to, slow a little bit of exposure on him.
Yeah, this is a game that to me appears to be more favorable to kickers and the defenses, a game where both sides wind up in the teens. And maybe no one gets in the end zone.
Agreed. And one of the most fun games up next, Eagles-Browns.
Yeah.
Now, it is potentially just a complete mess. No, it is it's a complete mess.
And I actually really like this one.
The total is 43.5, but there are some players I like, especially value considered, and I don't know how I feel about allowing myself to like them, but it's kind of like I might be going in,
I think on both sides you're going to get suspect defenses making average offensive players look better. And these average offensive players are on suspect offenses, so their prices in daily fantasy are fairly low. I love the Browns' backs against the Eagles. I think Crowell on the early downs and near the goal line, Duke Johnson impacting the passing game. And I think, Robert Griffin III is going to use the backs a lot. And they're going to use the short passing game. So you can like Gary Barnidge, but Duke Johnson in the PPR formats, very intriguing for daily fantasy. The Eagles had the worst run defense in football last year, allowing almost 2,000 yards to fantasy backs. So Crowell could go 80 combined yards on a touchdown, and Duke Johnson could do the same, impacting it via the pass.
Agreed. And Duke Johnson's really the guy I'm looking at more so on DraftKings. And then I think, like you mentioned with Crowell, he might be more of a FanDuel guy. But yeah, I think this whole Browns offense is in play. And I don't know how I feel, but that's how I feel, I don't know how I feel about how I feel, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, you gotta exploit the suspect defenses, and I think we have that with the Eagles. Both sides. Like I said, marginal offensive performance, but when you match them up against each other, it looks like this game could be a little more surprising in the scoring than most people will imagine. And then the number crunchers are going to avoid this game, but this might be a game where off the paper, it's a little better for daily fantasy players.
Agreed. And I see you mentioned on the Eagles side, Jordan Matthews and Zach Ertz as guys that'll probably be go-to options, which I definitely agree with. I mean, they signed Ruben Randall in the offseason, and he was kind of, chilling there. He was supposed to be their third, receiver this year or second receiver, battling with Nelson Aguilar, and he's just gone. And I mean, that kind of defines it for me. I think it's going to be Matthews and Ertz as the go-to guys. So against the Browns, I mean, certainly like both the tight ends in this matchup. And one more guy, I mean, I don't know how you feel about Corey Coleman, but I loved him out of Baylor. I think he's a guy you could take a chance on in a tournament and maybe,
I will say, though, his price from what I saw on some of the sites reflected his talent, and I don't think his circumstances reflect his price. So I'm going to be more of a wait and see. But I can't wait to see if Josh Gordon can get back. There might be some intriguing value, some hidden value out of this Browns team.
From a long-term perspective, I'm super excited about them. Especially, I mean, now they have 2 firsts next year, so it'll be really interesting. And like you mentioned, if Josh Gordon can stay on the field, that's potentially lethal. So, next game up here, Vikings and Titans. I mean, Vikings dealing with just a brutal injury a few weeks ago. Obviously, trade for Sam Bradford. We'll see, who even starts. It should be either Sean Hill or him. I think it's going to be Sean Hill. Going to be tough for Bradford to just jump in, basically after he gets off the plane. But it seems like this is going to be an Adrian Peterson game. Classic Adrian Peterson game. What do you think about this matchup?
So volume, I think, is definitely in Peterson's side. But at his age and with the offense, going into this week so one-dimensional, I think it's going to be tough for him to really have the huge games that you've seen out of Peterson. But he will get the touches. So if you're setting your cash game lineups on volume, Peterson is it, and he's there. The Titans running game I don't love against the Vikings front. I think they're pretty good against up front. Murray and Derrick Henry will be good down the road. This is probably not the time for them. But with that said, against a good defense, when you get a quarterback who can move around a little, like Cam Newton did against a very good Broncos defense on Thursday night, I think Marcus Mariota can make some plays, off play action, creating plays out of the pocket, and maybe getting some action to Delaney Walker and maybe a deep ball downfield off the heavy usage that we anticipate from DeMarco Murray.
Yeah, again, you mentioned that mobility, and that kind of always, keeps Mariota in play a little bit here. Tajay Sharp is a min price receiver, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest playing him, but I think if you're like really looking to load up on certain positions, it's at least someone to consider and then eventually reject. But you're like, well, I could potentially throw him in. I'm not going to, but I could do it.
There is a groundswell of love for Tajay Sharp. So I think more people are going to play him probably than should, just on hype alone. So I'm not necessarily going that way, but I do like Mariota not confusing, but tricking that a sound Vikings defense and making some sneaky plays in the run. So, like Newton did against the Broncos, maybe you get 40 yards and a touchdown rushing to add to modest passing numbers for Mariota.
Right, and I think we always kind of like Delaney with Mariota, always a pretty safe option. But yeah, beyond that, I don't think it's a week for the running game. I like this Vikings defense. Yeah. Next one here. Lots of debates about, the running back situation for the Chiefs. But overall, I think Kansas City should, take care of business at home against the Chargers.
I think this is one of the survivor picks. If you're not going with the Seahawks over the Dolphins, the Chiefs at home against the Chargers, the Chargers only scored a total of 6 points against the Chiefs in two games last year. I know they're going to be without a full go Jamal Charles. You'll probably get Spencer Ware for high volume, and Andy Reid loves using the running back early and often in the passing game, the running game. Spencer Ware is going to be impactful, and he's at a low price, so a lot of people are going to use him. I think also a sleeper play, not necessarily a super play because it's the top price of the board, but someone that you can put the ducats on. The Chiefs' defense against Phillip Rivers, generally error-prone, not had good games in the past few against the Chiefs, so it creates sacks and turnovers. So this matches up nicely for the Chiefs' defense, where obviously as the popular play, one of the more popular plays at running back this week.
Yeah, certainly popular, certainly a cash game option. I mean, we have to watch what officially happens with Jamal Charles, but it really does seem like he's not going to play. So, yeah, Ware and cash. And as you mentioned with the Chiefs, I mean, I like the Texans too as a potential, cash game defense. But if you're looking at high-end cash game defenses, I think the Chiefs are it this week if you're not going the Seahawks. Yeah. It just seems a random stat that I thought was interesting was Danny Woodhead, the receiving extraordinaire, only had less than 10 yards 2 times last year, and they were both against the Chiefs. I mean, Phillip Rivers didn't throw a touchdown against them last year. It just their defense didn't change enough for me to be, comfortable rolling out any of these Chargers guys, and I just think this is going to end badly for them. I love Melvin Gordon, but even if we think he's going to rebound, this is not the week to fire him out there.
I agree with all that. This next one I love.
Yeah, no, okay. The Raiders versus Saints, 50.5 over under. I think we all circled this one as we, looked at the schedule a month ago when all these prices came out. Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Drew Brees, Derek Carr, Latavius Murray, Mark Ingram. It just keeps. There's a lot of players this game has to offer. So I guess who are you specifically on here, or maybe who maybe are you fading that might be interesting here?
Well, I think if you're not stacking the Raiders, which I think you should, you at least go with Crabtree, because versus Cooper, his price is more favorable and more of a value. And I think Crabtree is one of the more underrated receivers in football. His second year with Derek Carr in his third year, which that tends to be a year that quarterbacks make a significant jump. And Carr's put 2 pretty good years on the fantasy board. I know everybody going into last year thought his rookie numbers weren't going to be achievable in his second year, and he trumped them with Cooper and Crabtree. I think it's going to keep going. Latavius Murray is going to cause havoc in the passing and running games. It's going to be wide open. Both quarterbacks going after it, just like we said with Rodgers and Bortles. Just about everything you can find, you can gobble up. One thing I will say, the health of Jarius Byrd for the Saints will take them from being one of the most suspect defenses against tight ends to being a pretty good one. So those that are in love with Clive Wolford as a sleeper tight end, maybe this isn't the great week to do it, because I think Byrd can play, and he plays against the tight end quite often.
Yeah, initially, when I first looked at the schedule, I just shouted Clive Walford out into my room to nobody, and I was like, Clive Walford! And
the only other person that does that is his girlfriend.
And with a guy like Jared Cook opening up, even a Vance McDonald or something like that, I just think maybe it seems like you're not going to get the low ownership I initially expected. I've seen quite a few people bring his name up as a hot punt tight end name, and I don't know. Without that, really low ownership, I don't know that I'm that interested in him anymore. So, as for Coby Fleener on the other side, I love his situation. I worry about what I was hearing out of training camp, but they gave him a nice contract. I can't imagine, they limit his role too much, at least in week 1. I think they're going to at least see it through the first half of the season. If he's just dropping balls every week, then that role is probably going to get, chipped away at throughout the year. But week 1, I don't see them just giving up on him already.
Yeah, Breeze makes tight ends work, and Fleener's got enough juice to have a good performance in this one. Brandon Cooks is another strong play, and you can go with a stack on either side and multiple stacks on either side. There's a lot to love in this game. Mark Ingram isn't the best DFS value out there, but he is going to get used frequently, and you should go back and look at the progress he made as a pass receiver. It's coming off career highs in receptions and yardage, and Sean Payton loves throwing to the back. So the running backs, the tight ends, the receivers, Breeze loves it all, and I think it's all going to be productive in this game. Even if you love the Raiders' defense, Breeze is going to push the pace. Carr's going to push the pace, and it's going to be another game like that Bucks or like that Jags Packers game that gets wild.
Certainly, and like you mentioned with Michael Crabtree, he's the top cash option for me in this game. I think there's a lot of cash options, but with price considered, I love that play overall. And okay, so Dolphins Seahawks next, total of 44. Dolphins, 10-point underdogs in Seattle. This game's going to get ugly. I will say, though, Jarvis Landry, I just feel like the dump-offs and the role he plays in this offense, I don't hate it. As much as I initially did when I looked at this, I said, okay, I'm not playing him. But then you kind of look at it and you go, well, maybe he does get 15 targets in this game when they're down by 20,
Yeah, no, that is a good point. I don't necessarily bank my plays on game flow, but that's one where it comes out. You're like, well, that's kind of why it happened. But I'm not going to love any Dolphins player against the Seahawks in Seattle. I do like Thomas Rawls, who some people don't because of his injury status and what they've been saying about potentially his usage. I think he's going to be the primary back at least until this game is well in hand, and then maybe later second half you'll get some Christine Michael. But Rawls is a solid play for me. I think the Dolphins were the worst team in fantasy against running backs last year, and Rawls replacing Marshawn Lynch is on the verge of something fairly significant. And before his DFS price corrects to his production, you might want to jump on.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And, his quarterback, Russell Wilson, you mentioned him as a cash game play in here, and I definitely agree with that. If you're looking at Aaron Rodgers, I think with price considered, you might even have to consider Wilson over him in cash. This is just such a cake matchup for him overall. You love his weapons, Tyler Lockett and especially Doug Baldwin. So I think those are maybe some potentially interesting stack options. And even as a standalone, I like Wilson quite a bit.
One thing that concerned me about the Seahawks stack is the numbers suggest such a role for the Seahawks. You can't be sure that the passing game is going to stay interesting. So I'm more on the backs than the receivers, but all of it could be good here.
Fair enough. Next game, a fun one, one that I think not necessarily circled, but there is quite a bit of value here. So Giants, Cowboys, total of 49. Obviously, Tony Romo down with the back. So what are you doing with this Cowboys offense?
This is a game that might be a little bit of fool's gold. I think that line is even a little high. Dak Prescott was interesting in the preseason. He made some plays, and that Giants defense was legendarily bad last season. They ranked dead last in the NFL, and they were the worst against the pass, second worst against fantasy quarterbacks. But they did add significant pieces. Eli Apple, the rookie corner. They added Janoris Jenkins on the corner. They get a full year of health from the pass rusher, Jason Pierre-Paul. Landon Collins, the safety, in his second year should be better. I think there's a lot more to like about this Giants defense than you might imagine looking at the numbers. And then when you look at the quarterback in his rookie debut, making a start in an afternoon game, in an afternoon game that historically gets loose, the Giants-Cowboys game, gets a little loose. I don't think it's going to get loose. I think it's going to be a lot on the running game, a lot on Ezekiel Elliott. But that's going to be pounded against the Giants front that's got some meat in the middle there. Jonathan Hankins and Oliver Vernon, both pretty good run defensive tackles for the Giants. I think this is a game that's going to play under and play a bit slow. And when you look at the Giants side of the ball, you would say, the Eli Manning's had some huge games in the past against Cowboys. Well, he didn't throw a touchdown against the Cowboys secondary last year, so you got to be a bit wary of loading up all the big dollars on Odell Beckham. I think if you're going with the Giants receiver, I'm going to throw a little sleeper out there, Victor Cruz, and his long way to turn from multiple season-ending injuries. So lower price guy, maybe not the exciting option that Odell Beckham is, but he'll give you more value, I think, because he'll get some targets.
Ooh, I don't think a lot of people are going to be on Victor Cruz.
So not at all.
That's going to be interesting. I think all that ownership's going to Sterling Shepard. So I think that's certainly an interesting way to look at it. In terms of I think like you mentioned, this might be fool's gold because we've seen how the Cowboys have played really the last, 2 years and probably heading into this year. They got that offensive line, they built it up, and they want to run, and Tony Romo put up good passing numbers a few years ago because he was so efficient and they had DeMarco Murray, crushing in the run game. But with Dak, I just feel like you mentioned, they're just going to run Ezekiel Elliott the whole game and try to control the clock. So that certainly happened last year. Odell Beckham really didn't, break out like we wanted in those Cowboys games. So, I certainly think it's sort of interesting, and especially when you're debating Odell Beckham versus like an Antonio Brown or Julio, I
Right.
think you should definitely take that into account. So
Yeah.
we're not saying don't play Odell Beckham, but certainly take that into account. As far as Dak, I mean, I don't think you can ignore him for the price.
I'm going to say that the Giants defense is going to get after him a bit better than you might expect. And that might be optimistic speak there, but I think what you saw with Trevor Siemian, kind of short throws, relying on the running game, throwing to the backs, throwing to the tight ends, throwing short to the outside, not taking too much chances, don't hurt themselves. I think that's going to be the game plan here for the Cowboys.
Agreed. So hopefully he sneaks out on a rollout and runs 70
Yeah,
yards for a
yeah,
touchdown.
yeah, yeah, which is possible.
Yeah. Patriots Cardinals next. The Tom Brady-less Patriots. This one, man.
Actually, Russell, I think you might have missed the Lions Colts game. Did we already go over that one?
Oh, that's kind of important, huh?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were on a roll.
No, that's cool. We should certainly not ignore the Lions and the Colts, total of 49. I love both teams in this game. I love attacking the secondaries of both these teams. So, yeah, certainly not a game to forget because there are a lot of cash game options in here.
Yeah, I think the Colts secondary is going to be bad. Their defense is going to be very bad. You couple that with Andrew Luck returning from his injury at home. I think he's going to be very successful against the Lions secondary. So this is going to be a game that gets pretty good numbers for both receiving cores. You can like Golden Tate as the go-to man now that Calvin Johnson is gone. Anquan Bolden, Eric Ebron are going to get targets from Stafford. I'm not necessarily playing Stafford, but I will consider his targets at their prices, playing against Andrew Luck, who I think goes for 280 plus and 3 touchdowns. And I think the Lions will keep up just because the Colts defense is suspect and they don't have their number one cover corner, Vontae Davis, for this one. So there's going to be even more numbers than we'll expect all year against the Colts secondary. I think the Colts secondary might be like the Saints and the Giants were a year ago, one that we load our DFS options up against.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of the hot names here has certainly been Marvin Jones. Obviously, very reasonably priced is how I'll word it on both sites. So I think he's someone to at least check out. I'm kind of intrigued by, the Theo Riddick, Amir Abdullah grouping. Obviously, Riddick just signed a contract today, a contract extension. Not a crazy deal, but I think it's worth noting that they like him in that role. There's even talk of him like moving to the slot at some point. And I think he's kind of an interesting guy against, as you described, this Colts really, really bad defense.
It'll be one that we'll love to have on the board.
Certainly. As far as the Colts go, yeah, I mean, Moncrief, Hilton, sure. Luck, even Frank Gore, I like. So I like all those guys quite a bit. And okay, now the game I was so excited to get to, which I'm not actually all that excited about, the Patriots and the Cardinals. Tom Brady-less Patriots. Man, I worry about this Cardinals, secondary for Garoppolo.
Yeah. I think this will be a game that has a good number because of the traditional strength of both offenses. But you got a defensive guy in Belichick who's going to clamp down on the Cardinals' offense and slow the pace down, keep the game within reach, make the offense dumb down to the point where Garoppolo's not going to hurt them. So this is a game that's going to play under the total, play slow, running the ball, play action pass, defensive struggle. All the things we don't like to hear about our fantasy game. So you can't expect Gronkowski and Edelman to perform up to their prices with the first start of Jimmy Garoppolo. But I do like James White, and I think a lot of the lineup optimizers at Daily Fantasy Cafe are going to load up James White quite often because of his price and his usage as a pass receiving back and a change of pace guy.
Certainly someone you have to consider, even if you don't like the matchup. I think he's going to get those catches with, Dion Lewis sort of injured for what seems like is going to be a while. So certainly someone to look at every week, pretty much. I do worry, especially about Edelman with, Tyrann Mathieu there, sort of manning like the slot receivers and such. So that definitely worries me. David Johnson, you mentioned him here.
Yeah.
I don't know about the price, I guess, with this matchup considered is what worries me. Obviously,
Yeah.
I like his athleticism, and I like what he did last year. I worry about this matchup week 1, I guess.
Yeah, David Johnson to me is going to be one of the best fantasy backs in football, but Bill Belichick does things very well in coordinating his defense and taking out the opponent's number one weapon. And you got to write down David Johnson as the number one weapon in their offense. Carson Palmer's got a various crew of targets, but David Johnson is the guy that gets a lot of it done, scoring the touchdowns. The Pats allowed just 8 touchdowns to fantasy running backs. They were sixth best against fantasy backs last year. I think David Johnson is going to be a bit limited. So if you're going with a Cardinals player, I'm going to go with a sleeper receiver, a wideout like J.J. Nelson or Jerron Brown.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. Yeah, I'm having trouble finding someone in this Cardinals game, but I do think a John Brown, if he plays, or a J.J. Nelson is very interesting from a tournament sense. So now we get to the Monday night games. Obviously, you're not looking at these if you're playing the main slate of DK. So Steelers and Redskins. There should be a lot more to like on the Steelers offense, but they just seem to keep getting in their own way. I love Le'Veon, I love Martavis Bryant, but obviously they're not going to be there for this week. So what are we looking at here? You in on Antonio Brown? You in on D'Angelo?
Yeah, so I think this is a game that's going to be very intriguing. Of all the primetime games, this is the one that's going to be the loosest because of the relative struggles of the secondaries. I know the Redskins added Josh Norman to the mix, but I don't think that anybody's going to slow down Antonio Brown. I'm not quite sure if Norman's going to be a man guy or more of the cover 3 guy he was called out to being with the Panthers. But you don't worry about Antonio Brown in primetime. You don't worry about Big Ben. And I think if you want some plays off the top of the board, off the top of the price list, I'm going with Marcus Wheaton. And, for the Redskins side, I like Jordan Reed is probably the number 1 tight end play, even over Gronk. I think the Steelers struggle against the tight ends, and he could put up 101 numbers for Kirk Cousins. And I like both quarterbacks and both sides of the passing games, and not so much the running games against either defensive front. They're both pretty good against the run.
Yeah, Jordan Reed just such a versatile piece, for that Redskins offense. I certainly love what he did last year, and I think while you do like some of the options around him, the Deshaun Jacksons and maybe when Josh Doxson gets healthier later in the year, but for now, I think they're going to continue to, load up on targets for him, and I think he's a great cash game option. As far as Marcus Wheaton, you mentioned, if he's good to go, which I believe he's going to play, all reports are that he's going to play. There's just nobody else, and I mean, there is Jesse James maybe for a red zone opportunity, but beyond Antonio Brown, I just think Wheaton's going to be the guy that they look to get, 7 or 8 targets a game and potentially contribute all over the field. So I do like him as a secondary piece, especially against this Redskins, relatively weak offense. So yeah, I really like this game. D'Angelo Williams, a borderline cash game guy for me. I'm not in on Ben as much as I like his pieces around him. I think that's going to be how I'm playing and trying to get exposure to him through his pieces.
I will say one thing about Marcus Wheaton. When Antonio Brown played at the Seahawks last year against Richard Sherman, and he's playing against Josh Norman here, Wheaton went off for 9 catches for 201 yards and a touchdown. So if a defense tries to take Antonio Brown out of the game, Big Ben can pick them apart and do it with a guy like Wheaton. So that to me is an interesting side piece to this Monday night game, which I prefer this game far more for DFS purposes if you're playing the primetime games, even over the Ballyhoo Cardinals Pats game. Steelers Redskins doesn't move the needle in terms of viewership, but it'll move the needle in terms of fantasy points.
Certainly. And you just gave me a vision. I see Ben Roethlisberger rolling around for 15 seconds, 3 guys, he breaks 3 tackles, and somehow Marcus Wheaton's open, for a 30-yard touchdown at the end of it. And nobody knows how Roethlisberger did it, but I can just see it now.
As long as those 3 guys that are chasing him don't break something on him.
Yeah, geez, I know. Last game of the slate, the Rams versus the 49ers. This 49ers team, I don't even know what to think of their depth chart on as far as receivers go. It's just a complete mess. Chip Kelly, he had great weapons with the Eagles and he just let them all go. And this looks like what he wanted with the Eagles. Just a bunch of random. I mean, I love Jeremy Curley, but he just picked him up 2 weeks ago and now he's going to be like starting in the slot.
Yeah. And Blaine Gabbert's your quarterback. The Chip Kelly system is still going to be predicated on the run, but I'm not in love with Carlos Hyde running in a Chip Kelly system as much as Carlos Hyde and running in a Jeff Fisher system like Gurley will do. I think Gurley is the big-time play. He's going to warrant a 25-plus carry day, particularly when you worry about who the Rams are going to start a quarterback. This is a Gurley game against the 49ers front that was bad against the run. They struggled stopping opposing fantasy running backs. So both sides are going to be run heavy, but the Rams are going to be successful at it with Gurley, and I think the Rams are going to control this game. If you're looking for a receiver on either side of the ball, maybe you go with the speed of Tavon Austin, getting up over the top perhaps off of play action, everybody gearing up to stop Gurley after he rips off a couple 20-yard runs, and then you get Austin in the end zone. I don't love the quarterback situation or the passing games on either side, but I do love Gurley, obviously, here.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad we're ending on a good note here because it's good to hear you're on the Gurley train, at least for this week. So yeah,
I am definitely a Gurley man.
Yeah. I think Gurley's a cash game play. I think it's fairly obvious. I've heard some rumblings that the 49ers defense is going to be improved this year, but I mean, based on what I have seen, and based on what I believe to be, a Chip Kelly system that, provides less rest for the defense, I think Gurley could definitely wear them down by the end of this game. Like you mentioned, 25 carry potential. I love Gurley in this matchup. And yeah, Tavon always that tournament guy that you never know when he's going to have those random, touchdown, long run games or long catch games. It could certainly be against this 49er secondary. He actually had one of those last year, so definitely not counting that out.
I will say because I missed C.J. Anderson, doing all that work in a run-heavy Gary Kubiak system, I'm not going to miss out on getting exposure to Gurley and the Jeff Fisher throwback 80s type, run the ball down your throat type attack. I'm going to be playing Todd Gurley in many, many lineups.
That is certainly Jeff Fisher in a nutshell.
It's gonna be Eddie George like 3-4 touchdowns. This is gonna be a big one for Gurley. I'm gonna make sure that I have a lot of exposure to it.
I totally agree. So I hope that's quenches your DFS thirst. If you want to check this out and check out Eric's article, it's on the site under NFL Week 1 slate breakdown. He's going to be doing this for us all year, so definitely check him out and give him a follow on Twitter. So
at Eric Max Sports, you can read all my musings. I'm going to be much more proactive in the past on Twitter during the games because usually I'm just taking notes and writing them in my notebook. This year, my notebook is going to be written live right on Twitter. So at Eric Max Sports on Twitter. And I look forward to a strong year doing the video with Russell Clay at the Daily Fantasy Cafe.
Awesome. We will see you in week 2, guys. Thanks for tuning in.